Hey guys, so I woke up today to a barrage of texts from my team asking me to react to this video about the show Couples Therapy on Showtime. And so, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Geoffrey, and I have worked with over 6,000 clients to date in the last 8 years, and I've helped save their marriages. And a lot of those people that I work with are actually therapists or who have gone to therapy themselves as well. So it'd be interesting to get a close look into this video and see what we can learn from it. I haven't personally watched the video myself, but let's go through it together.
I've been thinking about it, and in our work, a lot of our conflict, it's complicated by my own anger issues, right? It's by my own reaction. So I've been dialing that back as best I can. I'm not 100% yet, but what I'm noticing is that as I'm keeping myself in check, I'm kind of observing us and him from afar,
Great.
and I don't feel like in the heat of the moment as much.
So I don't exactly know what she's doing here, but from what I hear, she's referring to what we call in our program seat of consciousness. So SOC is when you are simply observing yourself and observing the situation to create a sort of distance between you and the emotion, you and the anger, you and the feeling. But from her, the way she describes it, it seems like there's a lot of just uh, what we call in our program, clenching your asshole to keep your shit in a way. So she uses the words in check, for example, or I'm kind of observing. And the problem with just clenching your asshole to keep your shit in with this approach, the surviving approach like this, is that, if you just keep your shit in normal life, it's going to lead to massive diarrhea. So that's why we always say the breathing techniques and holding your frame or journaling or just keeping things together, it's not a very sustainable strategy. It's a necessary strategy, yes, but it's not sufficient to actually um, carry on for the long term. So in our program, when we're dealing with war vets, for example, or traumatized victims, bad childhood trauma kind of cases, we definitely start them off with what we call the SOC, so the seat of consciousness process. And I do like that about this session is that it does come from a very compassionate place because a lot of our clients, they actually have a lot of fear, a lot of reluctance, a lot of resistance to actually investigate the ugliness within, because they may not have had or built that compassion to be able to do that. So it starts with that compassion to SOC, to seat of consciousness, to observe what things are, how things are as they are. But after you SOC that, you want to shift it and then observe the new feeling. So the SOC part is really the first part, but then you have to shift it and then you have to go to the new observation. So the shifting part is really like that. I don't know if you've seen that movie Inside Out, where you have an emotion like anger or sadness, whatever, and you see a certain memory from anger or sadness. You can change the way you reframe that moment. So a previous memory that you associate with anger, for example, you can change it to a joy thing. You can change the colors of your balls, right? So an example of this is I used to really uh, treat it. I used to really not like it when my partner would just kind of come home and grumble and complain a little bit about her life, about me, about the relationship, about their house, whatever it is. But I've seen since seen the same event from a very different perspective, from a very different paradigm in which, I see that as her expressing her femininity, expressing her true feelings, her true thoughts, as the fact that she feels safe enough to actually express herself to me. And she's trying to give me information, not to get me to do something, but to actually allow me to understand her better, to deepen the bonds between each other. And so whenever she kind of expresses those emotions now, the same emotions that I saw as inconvenient before, I'm now seeing it as very, very convenient and very, very wanted, even. And because of the change in the way I interpret that event, I can totally change the way I feel about something. And so, you know, when it comes to a relationship, what we need to do is not just to realize that, hey, whatever, if you feel upset with your partner, for example, don't just clench your asshole to keep your shit in. There is a way, there is a lot of methods that you can use to actually shift the way we think and feel about something to actually not feel bad or not feel like you're clenching your asshole in because there's no shit to clench your asshole for, kind of thing. So again, I don't know exactly what she's doing here, but I hope in her therapy sessions she's doing more or more of this and not just observing and doing nothing to change the way she feels or interprets the same thing?
I'm not 100% yet,
Mhm.
but what I'm noticing is that as I'm keeping myself in check, I'm kind of observing us and him
Mm,
from afar,
great.
and I don't feel like in the heat of the moment as much.
Mhm.
And I'm also, coming to, I don't know if a conclusion is the right word, but I'm beginning to realize that he's just closed off. So
Hmm.
what is there to work with?
Mhm.
What is there?
Mm. So this is where I see the first kind of red flag here. This is what we call in our program fundamental attribution error or FAE bias. And it kind of reminds me of a story with my own life. So when I was younger, I grew up in a very abusive household, and I used to be also known as the kid who has a lot of anger issues, and I would shut down a lot. So I would just be known as the person who just is very closed off, doesn't know how to express their emotions, very not in tune with their emotions. And so the cycle that created is kind of a self-fulfilling cycle where I was closed off and found myself getting angry a lot because I was deep down feeling very unsafe and very insecure. But the more labels that people placed on me about how angry I was, about how closed off I was, about why I was closed off, about why I'm angry, and just assuming so much character to me, the worse, the less safe I felt. And so the less safe I felt, the more the anger, the more the close offness worsened, the more the close offness worsened, the worse people responded to it. The worse people respond to it, the worse, the less safe I felt, and so on. And so that's really the danger with fundamental attribution error. And that's really the error of whenever you see someone's behavior, you instantly assign the behavior to a flaw or an issue with someone's character or someone's being rather than an issue or a flaw with maybe the environment, maybe the upbringing, maybe the context of the person's lives. And I see this a lot with couples that I work with and with a lot of new clients is that they often fall into this pattern of um, attacking someone's character or assigning or labeling someone's character based on their behavior. Just like what this woman did here when she said basically, that's just who he is. Right. And I think that is very dangerous because it creates a very stark self fulfilling prophecy. Because imagine here, if you are the husband hearing this, you're not going to feel very inspired. In fact, you're going to feel very demotivated. Going to feel very labeled. And probably when he tries to change himself and get out of that label is going to like grab hold of him forever. I think I'm sure a lot of you have felt this feeling where when you try to change something, your parents, your friends, they still know you as an old person, and so it's really hard. You feel this dissonance in your mind on what you need to do or to continue changing. So it also accidentally puts a ceiling on people, but it also, so most importantly, ruins the culture of safety, the culture of just like wanting to be yourself and become yourself, and the culture that allows people to blossom. It just ruins all that stuff. So here, right, you create this environment where the more you judge someone's character, the more of that they become because they become less safe. The more of that they become, the more you say in your mind, I knew it. I knew they were like that. And this cycle just perpetuates over time and it creates a self fulfilling prophecy. And people are often blind to the fact that they're actually creating the self fulfilling prophecy. And you want to think of a story too of my partner and I. So when my partner and I met, she wasn't a very sexual person. And that was something I that bothered me a lot because I'm a guy, obviously I have sexual needs, but, I could have gone the route of, "Oh, she's just not a sexual person, that's just who she is." I could have gone that route, but look at the cycle that happens if I go that route, right? I say to her, hey, she's just not a sexual person. Well, me saying that, me assuming that about her is not going to make her feel much safer, much better, much more inspired. It's not going to allow the feminine to feel safe to blossom herself. And so she's probably going to be more closed off. When she's more closed off, I'm probably going to think, you know what? See, this confirms that she is very non sexual. And the cycle just keeps going. But, whenever you see some behaviors from people, it's very dangerous to assume their behavior is due to a flaw in character right away. We usually and what I like to do in my own life is I like to always investigate um, and use that as a platform to actually gain more understanding about my partner, about why or how she is the way she is. Investigate to have a fun conversation and a light conversation about the past, the childhood, that just have fun investigating and exploring each other. And so what then happened in our relationship was that as we had these deeper conversations, not only did she feel more seen, more validated, more understood, that whatever she was or however she is, it's not something to be ashamed of. It's something to be embraced and something to be understood. And it's okay to be whatever she is. That not only allowed her to have that safety to actually explore, to actually look within, to actually change, because change takes a lot of courage, takes a lot of safety. But also, it gave me a lot of information as to what I need to be doing to be changing the culture of the relationship, to allow her feminine sides, to allow her traumas to heal, to allow her feminine sides to blossom, and to allow this sexual part of herself to come out. And so now, 10 years in, right, we're in a position where she would tell me in the bedroom sometimes, "Hey, Jeff, I'm a nymphomaniac," because she wants sex all the time. And, we've been together 10 years. And so really our sex life have gone better over time. Unlike a lot of people where they say like, oh, you get married, you have sex less. Ours is reversed. It's because again, if you learn how to create the right environment and not fall for this fundamental attribution error issue, you'll be surprised as to how much safety can create people's potential to change and catalyze people's potential to change, but also how much information it can give you to change the environment that can really add fuel to the fire to the overall change of this whole thing. So instead of the spiral going downhill like this couple here, maybe that's what's happening to them. The spiral can be going upwards in the case of my relationship. So again, this kind of goes back to the previous point that I made too about how you can see the the sexual issues that my partner had, for example, from a very negative light, from a fundamental attribution error light. And if you see it that way, you're gonna feel very angry, very pissed off, very hopeless about it. Like you can't change it, you're powerless to change it. But if you see it in the way where like we saw it, you can take the same event and feel two very different feelings about it, right? By changing the way you shift your paradigms about the shift the way you interpret something.
To work
Yeah,
with. So that's where I am.
fair enough.
Yeah.
And where are you, Will?
I'm wondering if, we launch into conflict and have all our defenses up and use our full arsenal just because maybe, maybe deep down inside we know it is over.
Mm-hmm.
'Cause I think we both really, 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 really fucking wanted this to work.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure that's hard to say. But that makes sense to me that maybe your fighting is kind of last gasps of trying to hold on to the marriage. And maybe the two of you could get to some other place. I feel bad that I wasn't able to kind of shepherd you there. But I think there's something else that's going on that I've been trying to.
So I'm gonna pause there a bit because I see them answering the question or asking the question, "Is it over?" And you know, I I I work with a lot of couples, obviously, and it's interesting to see how some couples they grow through trauma, and how some couples they actually go weaker through trauma. So some couples go stronger through trauma, some couples grow weaker through trauma. Like one of my employees, Jason, I'm sure a lot of you have spoken to him, but he actually had a trauma in his relationship where his one of his daughters actually passed away. And instead of making that relationship weaker, that event, that traumatic event actually made the relationship stronger. And so just by looking at the way this couple is speaking right here, I think the main problem that this couple has is that they don't really understand how to guide conversations and how to see trauma and problems as opportunities. And they don't know how to grow through trauma. But every trauma that comes to the relationship actually makes them crumble and grow weaker even more. So in their mind, I think they shouldn't really be asking the question whether will this work out or not, is it over or not, or should this be over? But individually, they should both be looking at their situation and asking, do I actually understand how to post traumatically grow inside? Does trauma make me weaker or does trauma make me stronger personally? But also as a relationship unit, do I know the skills and the ways to actually take trauma and use it to grow versus taking trauma and making it weaker for myself? Because for my relationship, for example, you know, and my partner and I have talks about this all the time, is that we go through every single trauma we have, every single difficulties we have actually makes us a lot stronger. And in fact, we can even go further to say, without those traumas, without those difficult moments, we would not be as strong as we are today. So I think is this inability to grow from trauma in their relationship, but also within as well. That is really the problem they need to tackle here. And I think that's the question they need to ask before even asking is it over or not. Because this post-traumatic stress tendencies is what actually got them here in the first place, right? A lot of people, what happens is they meet together and they have the honeymoon phase, and then from then on, right? You have kids, you have family issues, you have money issues, you have career issues, you have stresses. All these traumas are coming to your life, and if you don't understand how to grow from trauma, all these traumas, all these stresses will just make it weaker and weaker. Your relationship is like a pothole that just keeps growing bigger and bigger and bigger exponentially because it doesn't know how to deal with stress, how to deal with trauma. But if you learn how to actually, the skills to actually grow through trauma, to take a traumatic event and actually allow it to have beautiful conversations, have moments where you actually increase understanding of each other, increase the bond, increase the trust, increase the admiration, increase the respect for each other, increase alignment even. That's a very different ballgame because the curve now looks like this, where the honeymoon period is actually the worst period and it just gets better from there. So, take, for example, this couple with their closed offness, right? Imagine if she were to take some time to look at his closed offness and not attack it, but actually try to understand it. It's you and her, you and him, it's her and him versus this understanding, this project of understanding the source or where the trauma came from. Not as a project, but just as a fun process of discovery, right? That could open up so many beautiful conversations about the relationship, about understanding him better, his childhood better. And it also probably allows him to understand himself a lot better. That starts and catalyzes the growth process, the outgrowing process. And the same thing, if he were to take a look at her anger issues the same way, with the same curiosity, that will actually allow her to confront some of the more deeper issues behind her anger that a lot of couples I think don't have room to even explore most of the time, but that will allow her to fix her anger issues faster and understand her anger issues faster. But also, it can create a deeper bond between two of them, a deeper bond of understanding, right? So that's again another example of how this traumatic event right here can actually be a great stepping stone for them to actually get better, closer, more admiration of each other, and so on. But again, I think because no one has ever been able to teach them how to take traumas and actually increase that bond. Every trauma for them is a threat, like this one. You know, they don't know how to do this. So every trauma becomes a threat. And this is actually the one simple question that I tell a lot of my clients to ask themselves if they have any questions, really. It's, do I need to do the program, for example? Have I mastered the program? Is it over? Do I have a shot? Right? Can I, should I move on to a new partner, to a new relationship? I just tell them, ask yourselves, do you actually understand the skill to grow, to post traumatically grow internally? Does trauma help you grow or does it hurt you? Does trauma in your relationship, do you know how to create a culture in a relationship where trauma actually grows your relationship? Or does trauma hurt your relationship? Because if you don't know how to post traumatically grow, it doesn't matter what relationships you pick. You could be picking A, B, C, D, E, F. Your relationship trajectory will always look like the pothole. It'll always go down. But if you know how to post traumatically grow, then it doesn't matter what comes your way. You're like the Greek monster Hydra, right? Hydra has one head, you cut off its head, it grows two heads. You cut off two heads, it grows four heads. You just can't kill it. The same way with me and my partner right now, you can't kill us. You can't destroy a relationship because whenever you try to destroy it, whenever life tries to destroy it, we take it and we just increase our bonds. We grow stronger because of it. And I think this is also the big problem behind a lot of relationship avoid divorce solutions is that you're just trying to get people to give some band-aids to get up here. But we're not applying this whole concept of post-traumatic growth. If your approach to saving your relationship is just you know, like taping all the holes and putting everything together and not, working on the underlying thing, which is like, hey, you still at the end of the day don't know how to post-traumatically grow. If you're just patching it up like that, your relationship will always feel like a losing battle. And I don't know about you, like that's not what I want. But there's so many other parts of life, right? In weightlifting, for example, we understand the role that stress and trauma has on weightlifting. So our muscles cannot grow unless we put some trauma to it. In fact, if we don't put trauma to it, our muscles atrophy and we lose muscles. The same way with medicine, right? Um, Sometimes giving people a dose of a small virus or whatever it is actually makes their body stronger. In fact, if you don't give any viruses to the body, it grows a lot weaker. Gun, germs, and steel, right? And same thing, like I'm really shocked that no one has made that connection to relationships. So if your relationship right now is one that whenever trauma comes, it goes weaker, you have to realize that you're doing relationships wrong, right? Because these traumas are designed to actually help you grow stronger. But you need that skill to build that skill to actually help you grow stronger. You need to build that immune system to actually help you grow stronger, both in the relationship but also internally as well.
To talk to you about, which is that there's some way that you are not fully present, because it could be that it's not couples work anymore. Maybe it's individual work. And maybe if this is where you meet your history, because we've talked about how you've come with this pattern already that was established very early on, but that you're kind of hopeless about connection. Whatever happens between the two of you, that's something really important for you to understand about yourself and try to get in touch with.
So I do agree with the therapist in that I think they need to stop bickering about the relationship problems and actually look within. But I want to put a different spin to this, right? It reminds me of a story of one of my clients. So there's a couple that came in, and the guy says to so they're all in a session together, right? And the guy says, "Well, I have my anger problems because she never listens to me. If she listens to me, I would not be so angry." Then I go, "Okay, what do you think about this?" And the woman says, "Well, the reason why I never listen is because he always gets angry. If would stop getting so angry, I would listen to him." So you see the paradox here, right? And these guys have been married for 30 years at this point. And for the whole 30 years, there's just been spending the whole 30 years just blaming each other, saying like, "Well, I'll fix my anger problems if you fix your problem. Well, I'll fix my problem if you fix your problem." Right? And that's just been on this standstill for 30 years. Now imagine a different reality. If for the same 30 years, instead of saying like, "Well, I'll start this if you start this," they would just pause and say, "Okay, I'll work on my anger issue for me and you." And the woman goes, "I'll work on my listening issues for me as well." Imagine how much of a better place they would be at this point. And that's the thing with feedback loops, right? Is that with feedback loops, there is really no root cause, right? It's a chicken or the egg problem here. And so I see so many people who are in a relationship problem. And really what happens if you're in a relationship issue is that this feedback loop has gone on for a very long time, either in a negative way, usually. And people are trying to find like the root cause of the feedback loop, but there's no root cause. It's just a loop, right? There's no start of a circle. It's just a circle. It's just any point could be a start. So I think the whole discourse of conversation that people get into when they're having a relationship issue of like finding out whose fault it is or arguing about whose fault it is, or even I used to do this too when I would one up my partner on like, "Well, you did this. Well, well, you're saying I did this. Well, you did this." And then my partner goes like, "Well, I did that. Well, you did this, Jeff." And just one upping each other's responsibility and contribution to the problem. I think that's really a waste of time. I think we should just look at like, okay, what can I do and what can you do individually? And let's just do what we need to do to get it done. So if I was in this session with his clients, I would just say to them, same process, right? So first, get rid of the victim mindset of like the blame game. Let's stop playing that, right? And let's stop the voices that is fueling you playing that game. First step. Second step, learn how to actually be internally anti-fragile. So whenever traumas come, whenever issues come, whenever difficulties come, it doesn't crumble you, but actually summons a part of you that becomes stronger. And once you become stronger, you use the anti-fragile self to inspire and lead an anti-fragile culture in the relationship. And you watch just how that culture can change your partner's behavior. And as you change your partner's behavior, she will be more likely to then contribute positively to the culture, which makes it easier for you. And before you know it, you're in a very, very fortuitous cycle here. The same way for me, for example, I learned how to become a masculine figure in my relationship, in my marriage, to create and inspire safety. The safety that I create, right? The environment that I create helps my partner, my wife, blossom in her feminine a lot more. My wife blossoming in her feminine makes positive contribution to the environment again. That positive contribution to the environment makes it even easier for me. I mean, like for me to see her feminine expressions has been my breath of fresh air. It's like drinking cold water on when you're super parched, right? It's like she just gives me so much joy, which makes me want to do more masculinely healthy things, right? And this cycle just keeps going. But there's a alternate universe somewhere where we played the blame game and we said, well, Sam, I'm going to start building my masculinity when you do you build your femininity, right? And she says the same. We've just been in a standstill for 10 years at that point. And so I agree with this approach in that like every journey needs to start within. But I think if I were to work with these clients, I would tell them exactly what, how, and why is meant when we say, let's look within and not just leave it vague. It's like, well, you got to work on yourself. No, you got to work on yourself the correct way.
What do you think?
I don't know. In the back of my mind, I'm always thinking, okay, well, you keep saying you're done. Are you done? Are you absolutely done? And I mean it. I am, because I don't want this, and I don't see a way out of it without his participation. I don't want to have this fight anymore. Like, seriously, I would rather be alone.
So 3 things come to mind here for me. Number 1 is we always talk about this notion of a catch-22. And we always say how people do not leave relationships for the problem. So whether it's money problems, whether it's kid problems, infidelity, I don't care. You name it. It's never about the problem itself, but it's the catch-22 we feel when we have the problem, but we either don't know or cannot or don't feel safe expressing it, and we don't have any hope of ever resolving it or ever coming to a positive place because of that conversation, right? So you place yourself in this position where the problem exists. You will lose if you talk about it. You will lose if you don't talk about it. So the only way to go is to escape because you need to protect yourself at this point, right? So it's the point when people get to that catch-22 is the point when everything breaks down now. Okay. And that's the crucial part here. And so usually in my practice, what happens is when you take away that catch-22 by introducing safety, if you just clear the pipes to allow the conversation to happen and to allow for some hope or some idea that, hey, maybe there is a way out. Sure, the problem still exists, but maybe there is a way out of this problem here. Maybe we can talk through it. Maybe we can resolve it. That catch-22 goes away. The desire for divorce to leave goes away as well. So if I was this client, I would just say the number 1 priority right now, which is why the emotional safety is really pillar number 1, is to just create emotional safety. Because when you create emotional safety, you really open the doors to so much healing, to so much hope. And that's really the first step you need to do is to establish emotional safety, right? And what I would say to him too is that the emotional safety needs to be something that you create. So the inherent problem with therapy is that naturally the safety is to be created when the therapist is there. If the creation of safety is only towards not just towards you, but towards you and the therapist. So a lot of people going to therapy will often see this or feel this moment when they go home. They were really chatty and really expressive during therapy, but then when they go home, they just shut down again, right? That's usually what happens. So you need to understand how to create safety with you. So you need to be the one leading this conversation, not the therapist right now, right? So the therapist's job, I think, should be to teach the clients some tools, some skills to understand how to communicate in a way that is anti-fragile, that leads to post-traumatic growth, that is productive, that creates safety, that gets to understanding, and allow the clients to have their session to be able to do this together, and the therapist sit there as a moderator to make sure things don't go off the rails, right? But I think that should happen. And I hope that is happening because if it's not happening, then this guy there's no hope for this guy. Okay. Like if he doesn't understand how to create that safety, she'll always feel in the catch-22 and they both feel in the catch-22 and nothing happens. Nothing good happens from there. And the second thing I see too is also that for her, I would tell her, hey, get out of your fundamental attribution error here, right? Again, like we said, there's a self fulfilling prophecy that she's creating where the more she sees, the more she wants to believe that her husband is this really bad, closed off, clueless person, that is just going to create a lot of chain of events that is going to make her husband feel worse, doesn't inspire change, right? And it just creates a really bad self-fulfilling prophecy on both sides. So I would say for her, instead of asking the words like, what do I need from him? Which is why she says, I need him to be whatever. Instead of focusing on what do I need from him, I would actually ask him to be like, what do you need from me and how can I be there for you? After understanding the source of his close offness and shut downness, right? It's like, okay, so you're shut down because of this issue, because of that issue, because of this issue, because of this past. Well, how can I be there for you right now? Right. And that changes the whole dynamic altogether. And that's actually what I did in my relationship. Is like whenever we would address her sexual issues or whenever my partner would address my issues as well, we would just be both we have created a culture where we both come from the place of how can I help you help yourself kind of thing. How can I show up for you instead of just, getting and tugging at the person to be like, well, I need this from you. Give me this, give me this. It's not a very productive way to go about solving problems in a relationship. And the third thing I see here is that in this conversation, there's a lot of like competition. There's a lot of this idea of you versus me and not a lot of interdependence, like you and me versus the problem here. And you can just hear it in the way they talk about each other, they talk to each other. It's just, well, yeah, there's a lot of just tit for tat here. There's not a lot of like desire to actually understand and unfold each other as a project. So you and me versus understanding each other. You and me versus understanding you, understanding me, understanding the trauma, uncovering the source, understanding your feelings, understanding your thought process, understanding your intentions. There's not a lot of that kind of dynamic going on. And that's what I would also teach him is a skill to actually come from the place of you and me versus the problem rather than you versus me. That's a big, big milestone for a lot of our clients there.
Well, I just want to say a word about this being done,
Yeah.
which is there are all sorts of being done. You can decide, you know what, this is really not what I want. There's no way to make it different or
Right.
better, and we should let go.
Yeah.
And then there's being done, which is just the same as starting a fight or attacking. It's sort of an attempt to influence by being done. And that I want to dissuade you from, because that's just,
Right.
it just messes up the whole.
That is an interesting point because there is this, again, the self-fulfilling prophecy of whatever you think, right? So we always say your paradigms lead to the way you interpret the event, the interpretations lead to how you feel, and your feelings lead to actions, your actions lead to your reality. And so sometimes the way that these very unhealthy paradigms affect us can be very hidden. Like this couple, for example, it seems like what she may be suggesting, and I don't know the history here, is that there may be a bit of like subconsciously trying to sabotage a conversation or a relationship because you really deep down don't want it to work. Because if it's almost like when I would sometimes procrastinate a project until the very last minute. And so if it doesn't get done properly, if I fail because of it, then I can say, well, I could have done better if I started earlier. But because I didn't start earlier, then I had the mistakes kind of thing. So it's a way sometimes for us to recover or to cop out from our mistakes is by sabotaging our process so that when the product is not good, we can say, well, at least, if I give it my best, I would have made it work. So it's kind of the same subconscious ways that the human mind tricks us into sabotaging our ways. And often we're not aware of this, how we do this, but we just do it. But I thought that was interesting that she caught to that because that's a very subtle mental trick that we give ourselves.
Yeah.
System. I mean,
No,
you're
I see
not-
that. Yeah, I see that.
Yeah.
But I mean it. I'm done. I think I'm not the partner that he expected me to be or that he wanted me to be. That how I was back then in the early years is no longer the case now. I don't know. I if I'm honest, I don't know that I can be that person for him anymore. I don't know that I can be in that lifestyle. And if I was at one point, it was because I wanted to make it work, right? I really wanted the impossible, right? And I was wrong. I was wrong. I was wrong about him. I was wrong about us. And That sucks.
Hmm. I'm curious to see what the therapist would say about this.
I think at the end of the day, I want a partner that sees me too. And I don't think it's him.
Okay, so I'm not sure why the therapist isn't saying anything here because okay, so when my wife and I first met, we're very different people. If you ever meet us in the wild, I am very much an introvert. She's very much an extrovert. We look different. We think differently. I think in a very systematic way. She thinks in a very like feminine way, in a beautiful way, in a creative way. Our lifestyles are very different. Our values are very, very different. Like on paper, you could not pick two more different people than us, kind of thing. And to this date, we still have the same differences. In fact, we have very different lifestyles, right? But I used to see those differences as a threat, as a bad thing, but now I see it as a good thing. Think about it like a symphony, right? In a symphony, you have all these instruments, different instruments making different sounds, having different philosophies of how it's played, coming together to create a symphony, right? Now, it'll be a bad symphony if the violinist goes to the bassist and says, "Hey, you need to play more like me." And it'll be bad also if the bassist comes to the violinist and says, "Hey, you need to play more like me," right? Because when you do that, well, you are removing differences, and this becomes a very bad symphony. And so for us right now, right? I think what also I see here is that I think I don't want to read too much into this, but um, I think a lot of couples, they want their idea of a good relationship is almost like one that is attached to the hip. It's one that is very codependent. They spend every single minute of it together. They don't know how to do things aside, apart from each other. And anything they do apart from each other is like doesn't count. And they want to spend as much time as possible, right? They need to agree on everything. They need to do everything together. They need to be on the same page about everything. That's not what a relationship is supposed to be like, right? Remember that we are two different people in living the same life here. So if you look at the principles of interdependence that we teach in our relationship, it's more of a hey, we're living towards the same goal, you and me versus the toward getting towards this goal here, but recognizing that we are two different people. So for us, for example, right, when I see my partner's differences in her friend groups and the way things she talks about, I use that as a way to actually enrich my life. So then that creates a very different dynamic in the relationship where we don't always feel like we need to spend every single second, every single minute together. That I can sometimes go to the movies by myself. I can hang out with my own friends. I can do my own things. I can have my own projects. I can do projects my own way, right? And I allow her to do projects her own way, to do her own projects, to do what she wants. So, for example, if we're sitting down and talk about finances, I'm not telling her do finances my way. I'm listening to her and going, okay, your approach to doing finance is very different than mine, but let me investigate yours, and then that invites her to investigate my way. And before you know it, we come to this like very hybrid way of doing our finances that is fun for both of us, that is very efficacious because we take a look at both the masculine and feminine approaches to do it. All right. So our relationship becomes much richer here. So I think that's what I would say to uh, this couple here is that the reason why I think their relationship is so fragile is that any difference becomes a threat. But if they learn to embrace the differences and actually understand and actually go better from their differences, it will actually be really, really good. An example of this, I had a couple who came in, and the guy is they're real estate developers, right? So the guy is very aggressive. He likes to take on a lot of loan, a lot of debt, and that scares the wife. The wife is much more conservative, a lot more reserved, right? And they were always fighting together, right? But then once they work with me, I open up to the idea of that, like, hey, what if you stop seeing your differences as a threat, as a bad thing? That like you always bicker about it. What if, okay, so if you can take your husband's propensity to build the business, to grow the business, and you can take your wife's ability to see to play it safe, right? Those two does not have to be mutually exclusive. Those two can actually synergize together and make your unit even stronger. The same way right now also in my company, we have a lot of people with different very different personalities, and instead of having those personalities be clashing, I have trained the culture to be like embrace the differences. It's almost like when you're about to cook a meal, right? Let's say you want to cook spaghetti. You take the pros and cons from this recipe list and the pros and cons from this recipe list, and you come to a jumbo recipe that's like no cons and all pros. But you need to do that. You need to actually allow each recipe to be read out, to be researched, to be deeply discovered first. The same thing, right? Differences do not have to be a bad thing. So this is another example of how we can make our relationship more anti-fragile and more post-traumatic growth. Is that when we discover a difference, does it hurt you? Does it make you weaker as a unit, or does it make you stronger as a unit? As a unit, there's a big deal here. I think also, if I were the therapist, I would have investigated the complexity and the roundness of their souls a lot more, right? Of their beings a lot more. And I think sometimes when I see people who say like we're not compatible or that's not him or maybe we just grew apart, usually it's because they haven't really understood or delved deep into the underlying motivators behind what they do. So let me give you a story here. For example, I had a client who he doesn't want any more kids because he's much older, and his wife wanted more kids because she's younger, right? And at first they thought this was a difference that is irreconcilable, right? Kids and no kids. How can we ever come to a win-win here? But after deep, deep, deep discoveries and deep, deep talks about this, they both realized together that, hey, I don't think it's really kids that's really the point here. It's not really kids that I really want here. I think it's more about the husband has something to nurture, his career. She doesn't have anything to nurture, right? And she realized that her desire to want kids is not because of the kid itself, but because she has nothing to nurture. Now, the couple then decided to talk about many different solutions and open new doors to many ways that she can fulfill her nurturing side besides just having more children. And so they can come to a win-win here, but they come to a win-win out of desire, out of mutual want, out of mutual discovery first, mutual understanding first, where now they both agree to this new solution, but they're not really neither of them feels like they're compromising anything. They both really want to get this thing because they got to the root of what was the problem. Another story of this was, my partner and I. So I'm not saying this to brag, but I'm just setting up the example here because I think this is really important as a context. So last year, for 3 months, we went all over the UK, and that vacation or like work/vacation costed us $50,000. A year before that, we got married, and that was a $250,000 wedding. And a year before that, we got a new house, and that house was a $300,000 down payment. And again, I'm not saying this to brag, but when we got back from the UK trip, oh, not only to mention, I also bought my wife a watch that cost $30,000 as like kind of like a legacy, multi-generation gift, right? And so when we go back, she told me that she was upset because in the UK, she's been talking about this bracelet that she really wanted. And the fact that I didn't buy her the bracelet made her feel a bit pissed off. Now, if you hear the story, and this is a thought that comes to my head was like, okay, she's such a gold digger, right? Um, and it might sound like it at first on the surface. And she's a gold digger. She wants a lot of money. She wants a lot of stuff. She's very materialistic. And there wasn't a reality somewhere out there where I might have ended the relationship. I might have carried that assumption and said, you know what? I can't be with a gold digger. Like, if you look at my life, I'm very humble. I don't flash. I don't show off. I'm not spending left and right. We actually spend only 1% of what we earn, and we donate a lot. We we give a lot to charity, right? Um, and I could have said to her, "That's not the life I want." Um, you know, we're just too different now. We want different things, but that's not what happened, right? So once she said that, I want the bracelet, and I feel pissed off. We had a 3-hour conversation about it, and I kind of just tried to understand where she was coming from and what was happening in her mind. And after 3 hours later, if she realized that, she said to me, "Forget about the fucking bracelet. I don't care about the fucking bracelet, right? Really, I just want to feel loved. I want to feel accepted. I want to feel prioritized. I want to feel like that princess where when we're dinner together, I feel like I'm the only one person in the room. And what was happening was in the UK, because of the time difference, a lot of our evenings, I wasn't really present because when it was nighttime for us, or like 8 p.m. for us, it'd be 2 p.m. in the US. And so all my team was still working. And so whenever we went to dinner, whenever we went out, whenever we did things, my eyes were always darting. My eyes were always thinking. I was never really present for 3 months. That was supposed to be our work slash honeymoon trip, right? And so that was really the point, though. The point was that she never really cared about the material things. But what she really cared was she was trying to feel more loved. Herself just didn't know how to say it, didn't know how to express it, right? And so I could sense the same thing happening in this couple where they both, I think, have a very rich intention and story to tell. They have a very rich set of things to say, but they're not being given the opportunity to actually have the space, the 3 hour talk that I had with my wife, to be able to discover each other. You and me versus this discovery process, right? And but I think once they're given the opportunity to discover, I think they can really understand and start to see just how similar they actually are, just how understandable their lives actually are, the decisions actually are, and how what they think was actually very different was not that different after all, was not that irreconcilable after all. So that's what I would say to this couple is like, I think if I were, let's finish this off first. Well, so I think if I were to finish this off, I would just, my advice to both of them in different ways would be, okay, so one, I want you to learn the skills to post traumatically grow, not only inside but outside. So again, that requires you removing your victim mindsets, your bad patterns of thinking, and your bad patterns of behavior in a relationship, right? Um, I would also teach them learn the ability to adapt a lot more because again, when you meet, right, people are going to change. People are going to have different ideas, different ways of doing things, changes in values, changes in beliefs. If every change in belief is a threat to the integrity of a relationship, then you know it's a it's only a matter of time before your relationship ends, right? But just like in life, the ones who adapt best, they last the longest. And not only do they last the longest, they get stronger when they get more stresses. So learn to adapt, learn communication strategies, learn internal ways to look at the world, to interpret the world in a way that is allows you to adapt better. But also, and I think if I were to look at them, and sorry, I'm looking on a screen here because it really helps me to see the people I'm talking to sometimes. So I have their image up right now. But I think another one is also learn how to create emotional safety to allow gentle streams of communication to take place rather than allowing issues to accumulate over time and create a blow up. And the fourth thing I think is I think I would also teach him the different sides of masculine and feminine dynamics. So for him to understand how to allow a feminine to blossom and for her to understand how to make your masculine feel like a king, feel like they're more masculine, feel like they want to be more masculine. In the same way, for the female to feel like a queen, to want to be more feminine and to know how to be more feminine and to allow this culture to allow both to really blossom. I think that's what I would teach them. But because if you don't learn that, if you don't learn those skills that I said there, right? You could pick a new relationship, but if you don't know how to nurture the other side, so if you're a female, if you don't know how to nurture the masculine, if you don't know how to create safety, if you don't know how to post traumatically grow, your slope again looks like this. It's just you destroying one, picking a new one for a few years or 5 years, feeling good, but eventually things go down, and so on and so on, right? But if you learn how to post traumatically grow, doesn't really matter what you pick. You can pick to go with your current partner, your new partner, right? You can do it. So again, this is why I say for my clients, only one question. Do you know how to post-traumatically grow? Before you leave the program, make sure you know how to do that. If the answer is a yes, then feel free to pick whatever relationship you want, do whatever you want. But also if it's a yes, then you should be able to fix your existing relationship. But if it's a no, then doesn't matter what you do, right? You need to know, you need to focus on what you need to do next, which is learn how to post traumatically grow. Hey guys, so I hope that was helpful, guys. And if you guys like this, let me know because if you guys like this, then I can do more of these videos as well. But give us some feedback. Give us your thoughts about this video, about this couple, about what I said, about whatever. Agree with me, disagree with me, whatever it is. But I hope that was helpful, guys, and I'll see you in the next video. Guys, unless you've been living under a rock, you'll know that this is what I call the dark ages of relationship advice. I've been seeing so many more coaches pop up recently, giving advice that sounds amazing on the surface, but actually puts you totally in the wrong direction. And I've seen hundreds of my clients come to my program limping and wounded from after joining these other programs, because these other programs, what they teach sounds great. What they teach sounds amazing, but it doesn't really work. In fact, it's not just a lighter version of my program. And not only that, it actually puts you in the wrong direction. So, guys, I've made it my life's mission for the last 10 years and probably for the next many decades to cut through so much of this bullshit, because I was one of those guys who believed that same bullshit. And my relationship was in the rocks for the first many years with my wife. And that also led me to destroy so many of my relationships. And I didn't even know I was destroying it. So I am doing what I do, not because of money, but because I really want to show you guys the path and the roadmap that I've used to take my relationship to that incredible levels, but also the same process, the same roadmap that I've shown thousands of my clients to show them how the pros actually do it. So if I could give myself some advice back then, I would tell myself, stop playing around. Click the link, watch the masterclass. It's free, doesn't cost you anything. And at the end of the masterclass, if what you hear resonates with you, I'll show you how to apply for the program if you're interested in doing so. And I'm so excited to see more of you join my mission to cut through the BS and make marriages great again.